Greetings, friends, and welcome back to Middle Earth. Last time, our journey took us from Bree through the Old Forest and Barrow Downs, across the Buckland and the Shire, until eventually the road pointed north. That's where this chapter began. The North Downs. I came here thinking that I don't know, I'm getting stronger, you know? That I can handle myself. I had survived everything the game had thrown at me so far. I was getting more comfortable with my captain, and I was ready to see what was waiting beyond Breland. Well, the North Downs had a few lessons for me. Ghosts, orc armies, ruined cities, angry dwarves and rangers, some giant creatures, and one particular boss made it very clear that sometimes being a captain doesn't mean you have an army. So, before we leave North Downs behind, for now, let's look back at everything that happened. One of my first big experiences in the North Downs was traveling towards Fornost. And immediately the place felt different. These weren't peaceful fields anymore. There were ruins everywhere, reminders that something much greater that had existed here before. And then there were ghosts. Lots of ghosts. Walking through the fields of Fornost really gave me the feeling that I wasn't simply exploring another abandoned location. Something terrible had happened here. The past hadn't completely disappeared. It was still walking around, literally. And naturally, because apparently I make excellent decisions, I decided the best thing to do was keep going deeper. Eventually, it brought me to Fornost itself. Fornost became one of my biggest challenges in the game so far. I went inside determined to see how far I could get on my own, and surprisingly, pretty far. Enemy after enemy went down. I kept pushing forward, and eventually I had cleared almost everything. Almost. Then came a final boss. And this is where Lord of the Rings Online politely informed me, nope, you're not doing this alone. uh, I wasn't simply It wasn't simply about needing more damage or better equipment. The mechanics themselves weren't really designed for one person. I tried, I learned, and eventually I had to accept that this particular victory would have to wait. But I'm not finished with Fornost. I'm going to remember that boss. And one day, I'm coming back. Outside Fornost, the North Downs had much bigger problems. The orcs were everywhere. Settlements were under threat. People were trying to defend their homes, and conflict felt much larger than some of the problems we dealt with early in the journey. I felt myself helping the men of the North Downs defend themselves against the Orcs' invasion. And this was something I really enjoyed about this region. You start to understand that Orcs aren't just random enemies standing around waiting for you to kill them. The war was developing. People are losing their homes, different settlements are trying to survive, and everywhere you go, you can see the consequences. But the men weren't the only ones suffering. And eventually, our journey brought us to the Elves, and their story wasn't less tragic. Their home had been destroyed, like almost completely. What was once their city had become another casualty of everything happening in the North Downs. So we helped them. We fought the enemies responsible. We avenged what had been destroyed. And once again, I found myself very, very much appreciating how Lord of the Rings Online tells its stories. You're fighting orcs in many of these quests, but the reason you're fighting them changes. For one group, you're defending their homes. For another, you avenging that they've already lost. Different people, different stories, but the same enemy was slowly connecting everything together. And then they were dwarves. I don't think my journey through Middle Earth would be complete without some dwarven problems. This time, those problems involved some kind of rebellion and, of course, greed. Because apparently, fighting orcs wasn't enough. We also needed dwarves fighting amongst themselves. So, I became involved in their problems too, dealing with the rebellious dwarves whose ambitions and greed were creating even more trouble. But underneath all of these separate adventures, something bigger was starting to happen. Mans had their problem, elves had theirs, dwarves had theirs, and everyone was fighting their own battles. And Rangers understood something important. If the threat was growing, everyone would eventually need to face it together. And that brought us to Esteldín. Esteldín became one of the most important places in this entire chapter. Here I started working more closely with the Rangers, and instead of simply being sent to kill another group of enemies, we were trying to accomplish something much bigger. Bring people together. Men, dwarves, elves, groups with their own problems, with their own priorities, and probably plenty of reasons not to trust each other. But the threat from the orcs was becoming too serious to ignore. So we helped gather representatives in Esteldín for a council. After spending so much time helping each of these people separately, seeing them finally come together felt like everything we'd been doing starting to connect. And the story became even bigger because this wasn't only about orcs anymore. We started hearing information connected to something much more important: the One Ring. Suddenly, our little adventures in the North Downs felt connected to events that could affect all of Middle Earth. And I have a feeling that we're only beginning to understand that's really happening. And because apparently orcs, ghosts, and rebellious dwarves weren't enough, I met giants, actual giants. Seeing them for the first time was definitely one of those moments where I stopped and thought, okay, we're doing this now. So I helped them prepare their own battles and try to complete everything they asked me to do. I help with everything, I would say. But this is also where the North Downs taught me another lesson. There were quests that simply couldn't finish alone. I tried. Couple times I did try. But eventually there comes a point where determination doesn't compensate for the fact that something is designed for a group. And I started realizing that maybe I wasn't supposed to finish absolutely everything in the North Downs right now. I've been watching this series. You know how I like to play. I don't want to rush. I don't want to skip quests just because they're inconvenient. Every quest matters. So leaving unfinished quests behind bothers me. There are still deeds to complete. There are still quests waiting for me. There are enemies I haven't defeated. But they defeated me. And somewhere in Fornost, there is a boss who still owes me a rematch. But maybe that's a part of adventure too. Sometimes you reach the challenge that you've simply not ready yet. That doesn't mean the story is over. It means you remember where it is. You continue your journey, you become stronger, and eventually you come back. So, for now, we saying goodbye to the North Downs. Not permanently. There's unfinished business here. But our main story is calling us somewhere else. We're heading back towards Bree and then east into the Lowlands. New region, new chapter, and hopefully a chance to gain the experience and strength we'll need for the battles we couldn't finish here. When we're ready, we will return to North Downs. We'll finish those quests, we'll complete those deeds, and yes, we're going back to Fornost. So, that was our adventure through the North Downs. We walked among the ghosts of Fornost. We fought orcs alongside men, elves, and dwarves. We avenged those elves and their destroyed home. We dealt with dwarves. We helped the Rangers bring all those fellas together. And we learned more about growing threat facing Middle Earth and about One Ring. We met giants, we won battles, and for the first time we found battles we couldn't win. Yet. Because this isn't the end of the North Downs. It's simply goodbye for now. The road continues east. Next stop is Lowlands. No spoilers, no rushing. Every quest matters. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in Middle Earth.